Hello, Star fans. Hope everybody's having a great day. Well, it appears the President Cup curse is alive and well, and this version of the curse seems to be a particularly nasty one. Not only is it doing its job to prevent the winner from winning the Stanley Cup, but it seems to want to crush the team for the next couple of years. All you got to do is look at the last two winners: New York Rangers, Winnipeg Jets. Two of the first bunch on a golf course this year. Well, every team has a little category, a little column, injuries. And you can break that into three categories, subcategories. I call it WWH. So that's who, when, and how many. Now for your Dallas Stars, we filled up that how many. We had a lot of numbers in the how many. But I would argue the most critical of those three columns is who and when. The hockey injury gods looked favorably on Colorado this year. Really no substantial injuries to any substantial players to speak of. No key player was out for any critical length of time. But here you go. You're in the playoffs, conference finals, and not only do you have some minor injuries with some players like Manson, Lehkonen, but McCarr, McKinnon, last two games, somewhere around 50-60%. And isn't it amazing how a couple of key injuries can absolutely turn any team around? You may be wondering if you're if you're on a hockey team and your opponent is a faster team than you are, how do you combat that? How can you play against a team faster than you and potentially have success against them? I'll just watch the Vegas Colorado game film. I thought Vegas did a masterful job of keeping all the Colorado skaters on the outside of the rink. None of them. You could find a Colorado jersey inside the dots for much of the playoffs this year, at least in there when it mattered. And I'll give Vegas credit. That is a gritty, heavy, veteran team that knows how to win and how to play in the playoffs. But it wasn't that long ago. It's amazing how fast things change. In fact, I think it was just January. There was the conversation out there was, man, is this Colorado Avalanche team the best team in the NHL history? Could their record, they're on pace with the 76-77 Montreal Canadiens. I said as early as last fall, right after I think Colorado got off to their 20-2 start, that obviously it was a great team, but I noticed two deficiencies. So one of them was the power play. So going into the holidays, they were running about 17-18% on the power play. And I guess like a lot of people, I thought they'd get that. With the personnel they have over there, I thought they'll get that figured out. But I did say if they don't, it would cost them, particularly if they go deep in the playoffs. So, the power play is kind of like when you're 20-2 or you're 12 points in front of everybody else in the NHL, and you look on the side of the boat. That's a small. You say, well, there's a stress crack, but it's small. It's not going to matter. Well, when you get to the conference finals, that small crack turns into a gaping hole, and they were taking water in on the power play. Absolutely pathetic power play the Avalanche was rolling out there. 10% is what it was in the playoffs. 10%. Well, they managed to get one yesterday. I don't even remember. I'm not sure if they even had a power play in the whole Vegas series. Two observations, and I said this even when we played them late in the season. Their power play is very predictable. What they do on the power play, very predictable. They don't get people inside. You looked at the power play last night. No Colorado players. We're down low. Nobody obstructing the goalie. Nobody looking for deflections. Nobody looking for rebounds. In fact, I thought the power play was better without Makar. Makar gets out there, and he just wants to do everything. He just wants to hold the puck, take all the shots. So now, the best team in the history of the NHL, like all teams that get eliminated this time of year, are facing some grim realities. This was a year they really wanted to win the Cup. Their cap situation, I'm doing a post-mortem here, so pessimistic is what I'm going to label the Avalanche. Now, in saying that, they're going to be back next year. They're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be a pain in the butt. And they still will have enough to be in the top three, and the Stars will have to deal with them. But you look at just the near future on that team. They've got a few players coming off, like Kivi Ranta, into free agency. So with taking those salaries off, they got about 5'6", 5'8" in cap space. And they're going to have to fill that with I think, at least 2 or 3 players. They've got some really bad contracts. Like Nazem Kadri, he's 35, and he looked every bit of it out there in the playoffs. They're stuck with him for another 3 seasons after this one. That will take him to 39. Landeskog in his late 30s. Brock Nelson, 33 goals this year. Reverted back to his New York Islander playing days in the playoffs, where he was good for a goal about once a month. And really not a lot coming up in the pipeline there, as far as young kids that are going to be able to walk into that club. So, but the biggest deficiency that I brought out, and I talked about this as recently as even March, was goaltending. And I think that Gerald Bednar, the head coach there, he's been there a while. He's one of the longer tenured coaches in the league. I think it's time to get a new face there. I think he made some mistakes in managing that club. When you have a team that gets off to that kind of a start, it brings its own kind of different set of challenges as far as how to manage players. But I think his most glaring mismanagement issue was goaltending. Recall, I said in March, the Avalanche are delusional if they think their backup Scott Wedgwood was going to take them all the way to the Stanley Cup. I think the phrase I used was good luck. It was only a matter of time. And the time is going to be when you get to the Final Four, the conference finals, where, again, those deficiencies, every single one you have will be exposed. And man, did Wedgwood look like a backup the entire series. I thought Blackwell, the little he played, actually played well. What Bednar should have done, he should have started working Blackwood in more aggressively towards the end of the year. He's your guy. You're paying him almost $6 million a year. You're paying Wedgwood $1.5 million. Both those goalies are under contract for them next year. But after that, they're going to have to make some decisions. Blackwood is actually younger than Wedgwood, so Wedgwood's going to probably go out there and try to get a number one someplace, because I think the goalie market's going to be hot for the next couple of years. But as far as being on a Stanley Cup team, he's a backup. It's just, I've talked about this before. It's one of the things that kind of drives me nuts. I hear it a lot from fans. I hear it sometimes from commentators, and sometimes even from NHL coaches, where a backup like Wedgwood has stepped in there. And originally he's in there because Blackwood's hurt, and he's playing great. He's holding the team up. They're not losing anything. That's what a good backup does. But when they start saying, well, he should be the number one, and then you bring Blackwood back, he's trying to work his way back from injuries, not playing. So, it's going to take him a while to get to 100%. So he goes out, maybe has a couple of lackluster starts. Well, Wedgwood's playing better. He's our number one now. So now Vegas moves on. One general observation on the league itself, and as it applies to this year's playoffs. I'm seeing a league that is worn out. Specifically the players, some of the coaches. You have 2 seasons. You had the four nations, and then you had the Olympics. And just those tournaments alone, penalized the better teams in the league, because they're the ones typically contributing the most players. The Colorados, Dallases, even the Minnesota Wild. Guerin had half his team on the USA. And for the rest of the league that may not have been physically involved in either of the tournaments, they had to deal with the condensed schedule. You're playing 3 and 4s, 4 and 6s, back-to-backs, all over the place for the last 2 years. Just an observation. This looks like this league's worn out. A lot of this league is worn out. It'll be good to get back to a normal NHL schedule next year. And it's definitely going to be great to get a rested Dallas team. Now, I'll leave you with this, since we're Dallas Star fans. I continue to evolve and think on the Stars. But one thing that has struck me lately, something I would like to see happen. Jamie Benn, one of the great players to wear a Dallas Stars uniform, more than likely will have his 14 number retired. Definitely a Hall of Fame player for the Stars. But just terrible in the playoffs. Not only this year, but last year. I know Jamie wants to play the type of game he played 5, 6, 10 years ago. It's just not there. Particularly the speed. Younger fans only know Jamie Benn as the captain, the guy that used to be a great player that takes a lot of stupid penalties. If he does come back, and right now it's his call. I think the Stars want to do this the right way. Only certain players of his stature are going to get this, this luxury of being able to kind of go out on their own terms. If it was anybody else, the Stars, I think, would have basically parted ways with him. But if Jamie comes back, he's got his contract. Pretty much probably the same thing as last year. Now, fourth line right wing. That puts you in that rotation where you could be a healthy scratch on something. You want your captain to be a healthy scratch sitting up in a penalty box. So here's what I would really like to see. And the fact that Jamie Benn is not committed one way or another, I'm sure he's given it serious consideration. And I hope he'll always do what's right for the team. So if Jamie retires, I would name Mikko Rantanen captain like ASAP. He is going to be the leader of this team. He is the type of guy that can take a game over. One thing when you look at Edmonton, we've talked about them, with Draisaitl, McDavid, but same way in Colorado. They are so heavily dependent on their big two, McKinnon, Makar. So when there was nothing there, particularly for Nate McKinnon last night, there's so many games I watched with Colorado where they go into the third period and they're tied or down a goal, and McKinnon just turns it on and just takes over a game, just like McDavid does. That's what there's very few A-level players, but that's what they can do. And that's what Mikko Rantanen is. He's an A-level player that can take a game over. It's, the Stars do need an attitude adjustment, and that would be a good starting point. Put the captain on Mikko Rantanen. He's a very passionate, very competitive player, lead by example type of guy. Anyway, those are my thoughts. We'll see what happens with Carolina and Montreal. I still like Carolina coming out of this, but it's a fun series to watch. Canadians are playing as good as they can play, and I think we'll have a pretty good finals as well. So enjoy the rest of the Eastern Finals, and we'll talk to you when they're done and set up the Stanley Cup Finals. So you guys have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. And go Stars.